Well, you very likely know about the three laws of robotics. If you don't, go read Asimov. But you might not know about the three laws of IoT. So we have Nenad from the AWS IoT community team joining me on the IoT show to discuss these three laws and how they were used by AWS to create Greengrass. We'll discuss the inception of IoT at the AWS and what's the philosophy, what's the approach. And you'll realize that they're very much customer obsessed. That's on the next IoT show. Hey, hi, this is Olivier watching the IoT show. Thanks for tuning in. And today we have Nenad from AWS IoT. Nenad, how are you?
Yeah, all good. What about yourself?
I'm great. I'm here in the Seattle area enjoying the sun today and the
Oh,
cold,
nice.
Which is rare, like both. I would say. Where are you
Yeah, I
based?
mean, I haven't seen sun in a couple of days here in Berlin, Germany. So yeah, it's good that at least
Same.
it's shining somewhere.
I like Berlin. I prefer, Bavaria, like Munich, because the mountains are closer.
Oh
But Berlin
yes,
is a nice city as well. How long have you been in Berlin?
it's been more than 10 years now. Yeah, long time.
Wow. Wow. Crazy. Well, I'm a French guy living in Seattle for 15 years now, so
Yeah,
I can
there you
relate.
go.
I can relate. Cool. So, Nenad, who are you? What are you doing these days at Amazon? And well, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh right. So I have a degree in mechatronics. I'm a mechatronics engineer. And I kind of started this journey as building out PLCs. So we had, like after university, I started a job. It was a startup in Serbia. I'm originally from Serbia, by the way. And we started building this PLC that was supposed to be used in HVAC systems because there was nothing out there that you can program in this kind of like a diagram, using some kind of diagram and block diagrams and so forth. So we did build this. And yeah, I was using like SCADA systems back in the days as well. Like that was 15 years ago. But from there, I kind of moved into this IoT. At that point of time, it wasn't really that popular, I would say. But it was something that, I was used to after the university. So this is how I kind of generally moved into the IoT space. Originally working in the automotive industry here in Berlin. And then throughout some startups and whatever not, I also worked for Telefonica. And then about 4 years, maybe now it's going to be 5, I joined AWS. There I joined as a IoT architect. So that was kind of my first role. And nowadays I'm working and more or less sharing my knowledge in regards to IoT in general. And we have this community that we are building called IoT Builders, which,
Yeah.
we are talking about all the interesting things in regards to IoT and AWS IoT as well, right?
Yep. I like the term you've been choosing, IoT builders. I think it does make perfect sense. You are an IoT builder. I have been as well, and the audience is very much IoT builders because it's not just about developing. It's not just about putting together hardware. It's you're building solutions, right? And you very often have to think about the hardware, the software on the hardware, the embedded part of things, the connectivity, the security, the cloud aspects.
Yeah.
You're building things, right?
Yes. I mean, it's as you said it. It's like it's not the typical like you can say, oh, I'm a backend in a developer, or like I'm a full stack developer, or like I'm a mechanical engineer, whatever. When you are dealing with IoT, you have to touch all of the aspects of the IoT product, and that can be really vast. I mean, I think in
Yeah.
your shows we heard that many times, like with submarines or whatever it is, right? You need to touch and understand it to some level at least in order to build upon it and then make some useful things out of it, right?
Agreed. Agreed. And so that leads us to this discussion today is about you telling us more about how AWS offers solutions, helps building IoT solutions, and that's why I like this notion of builder. And as a matter of fact, Amazon had lots of experience starting with warehouse management and things like that. AWS itself as a cloud solution was inspired by all the experience that Amazon as a e-commerce and shipping company built along the years. And so the IoT part is similar, right?
Yes, I mean, it's interesting is like if you look backwards in time and all the services that AWS provided, it kind of started from Amazon. I mean, the original story about like EC2 and so forth is kind of, Amazon was having these data centers and they were trying to figure out like what is the amount of scale they need in order to serve the peak, which is this Prime Day, right? But then the question was like, once the Prime is over, like, what do you do with all those servers and everything? And then, this is how AWS started. Somebody said like, okay, let's just rent this out and see how it goes, right? So this is where this whole business about AWS kind of started. I would say it's kind of the similar pattern that's happening with the AWS IoT in the sense that, there was a lot of learnings, as you rightly said, from Amazon Prime, Amazon Echo, Amazon Robotics, and all that. And they said, okay, let's figure out and build out something that we can, based on all that experience, that we can share with other customers. So the customers that are outside of Amazon can actually use. So all of that kind of knowledge came into that service, and that service was launched in 2015. So that was kind of quite a while back in the IoT timeframe.
True, true. Actually, yes, 2015 is already some time ago. Damn it.
Yes.
Almost 10 years soon, right?
Yes, yeah.
That's a long time ago. So tell me, we will not go through the laundry list of IoT services in AWS. Like it's like in Microsoft Azure and in other providers. There is a set of services that allow connecting, managing devices, integrating into different types of PaaS services in the cloud and so on. But what I'm more interested in from your perspective is that the high-level perspective on how AWS approaches IoT, right? By experience, because the implemented solution, in Amazon, in like warehouses and so on. But what is an IoT solution for AWS? How do you approach it?
Yeah, so I mean, at AWS, we like to work, from the customer backwards. So at first, we have that engagement with the customers, and then sometimes the customers are internal, sometimes they are external. But we try to engage with them, listen to them carefully, and then kind of propose a solution, and then work backwards from there. Right? It's the same here. The idea is that once we looked at what are the common patterns that's are happening over the IoT, we notice, okay, it's like there is a message broker. There is a message broker that is the main ingress point where devices connect. And in many scenarios, like MQTT was the one that is kind of prevailing, and that's why the AWS IoT Core is just an MQTT broker, more or less, right? But then we notice, okay, once you have the MQTT broker, that's just one layer, like that's the connectivity, that's the data pipeline. So what you need to do is you need to allow those developers, the builders, to build on top of this data pipeline, right? So that's why we kind of started and say, okay, we might need some ruling, because at the end of the day, this data might need to go into some databases and then further processing or analytics or whatever. So let's start with some ruling. So we kind of added this IoT rule engine. So which, like with the simple SQL syntax, you can then route messages from specific topics and then, put them and dispatch them to either a Lambda function, which is kind of like the serverless way of running applications, and then, dispatching to the database or like a different Kinesis streams or whatever, right? Which, because at the end of the day, what is this used for? I mean, this data pipeline, if the developers cannot build applications on them and do some analytics or even, act on certain things. But then once we kind of laid all this out, we noticed that there is a missing piece. So in kind of 2016, Greengrass was launched. So that was kind of the requirement that we saw, that a lot of customers were saying, you know what, it's great that we have all this data and that we have the data pipeline, that we can build those applications in the cloud. But we noticed that there are some specific things that we need to do on the edge, right? And how we can get those best practices, like those Lambda functions and all that stuff, but actually deploy them on the edge and then operate on this data on the edge. So that was the main questions kind of, that we saw from our customers, and kind of build on that. So the Greengrass was kind of launched in 2016.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I was with Microsoft in the Azure IoT group, and we've seen the same thing. This notion of IoT being about sending all the data to the cloud, had been experience tested and was not really working. And as a matter of fact, you guys were saying that had the experience of implementing something that was not called IoT yet, but solutions, internally. And so that realization, I think you had pretty early at AWS, that there's a need for deploying and distributing your system, your solution, basically, right? Because it's pieces. If we bring things down to what they are, there are pieces of software that are running, the embedded part, like the more heavier device type of thing parts, and then you go up to the cloud and you have microservices, maybe hidden behind an API or a PaaS infrastructure. But at the end of the day, it's just pieces of software that eventually you will need to distribute based on where you want to deal with the data, right? And Greengrass definitely. What I liked with the way you introduced that notion of edge compute is the simplicity. Like same way you were describing how AWS created AWS IoT Core around MQTT as a simple broker. It's like start small and what the industry is using, and then extend with functionality.
Exactly.
I know Microsoft has been trying to have a different approach, which is more about like, hey, deliver the shiny object that does everything, and then we'll figure out exactly what works, what doesn't, and we'll fine tune that. So it's different approaches. They're landing in the same place at the end of the day, which is really interesting, And so, which is two approaches getting into the same place, and the place is this notion of distribution of the intelligence. Greengrass being the platform used on the AWS side, and Microsoft leaning towards Kubernetes, Azure Arc, but this same principle is containers, and you're going to use code that's been developed in the cloud eventually, similar or same code that can run in the cloud, you're now going to run at the edge on heavy edge devices, right?
Correct. I mean, there has been this notion, like, again, when we were kind of hypothesizing this and talking about this, and we kind of saw that there are like these three laws. I don't know if I told you this story before, but it's something that we can repeatedly talk about. It's like because of those three laws, this kind of Greengrass or need or operating something on the edge started becoming like more and more an important thing. And the three laws are like the law of economics, the law of physics, and the law of the land. So, I mean, in this context, it might sound something like, how does this all relate to operating on the edge? But if you take a look at like this law of economics, what we talk about is it really cost effective to ship all your sensor data at a certain frequency to the cloud? Like how much data bandwidth you need, and then like how much data will get there, and how useful will be afterwards. But that's basically the law of economics. Like it's not that cost effective. Being also that for the MQTT,
we have to remind people that it's not because it's in the cloud that storage is free, and it's not because we have connectivity pretty much everywhere on the planet or easily that connectivity is cheap. Like if you're on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean and you have to send data over satellite, that's expensive. So law of economics, I can see exactly why something like Greengrass, was developed, because it applies, no problem.
But it's also like, I mean, like if you talk about MQTT that runs over the TCP, like each of that connection, it costs you like no matter what, right? So from all that perspective, that's why the law of economics is there. It's like you will probably pay quite a lot to have that connection and then stream all that data. And then the second thing is the law of physics. Let's start with that one. The law of physics is like, does it really make sense to send that data and then have something that operates on that data and then set the whatever the actuator needs, and then like how much time will it take in order for that round trip, compared to if you would have something on the edge, and then you can have like a magnitude of like milliseconds when you can act upon data, right? So even though again you might have like the fastest internet or whatever, you will not definitely achieve that real time that you can if you have something on the edge that runs really near the sensors where they are and operate on that large amounts of data,
Makes
right?
sense.
So,
Makes
so
sense.
yeah, that's the law of physics. And then we have the law of land, which in many situations, I mean, here in Germany specifically, we had that quite a lot, is where there is some PII data or other types of data that cannot actually leave the premise. And then
Mhm.
for those specific purposes, there's no other way around it but just to have operate on that data, either anonymize it or like do some insight there on the edge, and then kind of send those insights to the cloud, right? So those are the three laws that we said, like, we kind of collected, and so we said, like, okay, we need to have something in place to kind of tackle all of those
Yeah.
problems.
I like this. I like the way you're using the principle of three laws, and coming from the world of robotics, you certainly
Yes.
is dear to your heart. I kind of
Yes.
like giving some credit to Asimov for the three laws of robotics, three laws of IoT. I kind of like that. It does make
Yes.
sense.
Yeah. It's pretty cool
When
concept.
we were discussing what we wanted to talk about today, we wanted to really emphasize what is specific about AWS IoT in their way of implementing IoT. And so we discussed the inception, where it's coming from, how it's been developed, from the ground up, using experience from customers and choosing industry standards like MQTT, Docker containers, and things like that as well.
Yes.
And this focus, I feel, right on Greengrass as IoT being what's happening at the edge. And so, like in the cloud, yes, you have a bunch of services dedicated to IoT, but as we were saying, you get very rapidly into mainstream services, right? So it's not very much IoT specific, but on the edge, it is specific. Are there other things that you want to describe as specific to AWS IoT? There are key things that someone starting or learning AWS IoT needs to really understand or focus on, to get started.
Yeah, I mean, what I mentioned earlier, this IoT rules engine, I think it is one of the most critical component of the AWS IoT, because it kind of allows you to easily route all of this messaging to different services. And I don't know the number, but it has like most of the services that you can think of, where you can kind of like route those data and have them. And then there are some guarantees, retries, and all that stuff that come out of the box. Because what we
Okay.
also noticed is that, I mean, we kind of mentioned this earlier, is that the builders, they don't want to do the heavy lifting of, building their own rule engine, building their own broker, and then handling all this load and scalability and all that stuff. Once you are kind of thinking in that scenario of like, okay, I have a product, right? That's the product that I'm building. The underlying technology might be IoT, whatever you want to call it. But in the end of the day, as a customer of AWS or anybody, I want to deliver that product to my end customer, right? So from that
Yep.
perspective, and the perspective again of the IoT builder, I just want to figure out like what is the least amount of things that I can do in order to build this service that I'm going to provide, right? So this is how how kind of we think about AWS IoT. And as I said, this rules engine that goes on top, the Greengrass, those are all managed services that goes on AWS IoT as well.
Got it.
AWS IoT Core, sorry, that provide all of this kind of baseline so that you can start and building those
Yeah.
your kind of building,
I
taking
like.
all the building blocks and then still building your own applications, right?
Yeah, I like to call them building blocks as well. I think it does make sense because you want to use these blocks versus starting from scratch. I'm seeing more and more. I'm seeing videos online. I do lots of handiwork. I love that, and I'm
Yes.
following some some video builders or makers that show their projects of building houses and
Yeah.
things like that. And I
Amazing.
see new technology that are actually about building blocks for
Yes.
houses where you just like build the walls and there's no need for insulation or whatnot. That just like big Lego bricks that you just put in top of each other, and then you also see all the tooling that they're using in building a house, an apartment, whatever. All these tools that you're mentioning, they're just working. They're just
Yes.
accelerating the building mechanism, and there are things that don't need to be reinvented. Like if someone had to, build their own hammer each time they wanna hit on a nail, that would be cumbersome and long. They need to have some good hammer to use, right? It's exactly the same thing here, right?
Yes, and I like your analogy. Like, I think we are all kids, playing with this. I mean, we played as kids as Lego blocks, but now we are kids. Instead of the Lego block, we're playing with the other
Still
tools
playing.
that we find at
That's
hand,
what we
right?
do. We're big kids. Do you have some pointers, maybe some websites you want to show us real quick to, hey, if you want to get started with AWS IoT, here are the few things that you recommend going to?
Yeah, so let me share briefly. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, this is what I kind of wanted to show is like the AWS IoT Greengrass, which is, things that you guys need to check out, or whoever is watching and interested in this kind of like edge computing and whatever. And then the other thing is I wanted to point out that we have this Dev2 IoT Builders page. And in here, definitely there are a bunch of blog posts that we put out, which are related to what I just talked about: IoT Rules Engine, MQT5, Greengrass components, all that stuff. So feel free to check this out. Give a thumbs up or a comment, or just say, we would like to talk about this specific point or that specific point, and we'll try to address it as well. So
Sounds good. Well, Nenad, that was very interesting. As a first time talking about AWS IoT here on the IoT Show, which is great. I love that. So I hope we'll have you again, when you have something to share with our audience and help them build their IoT solutions. I put down your LinkedIn profile so that people can start following you, because you have a lot of interesting things to say. And then I did put the IoT Builders website as well for people to go to.
Awesome, man. It was a pleasure talking to you once again.
Well, it was great to have you here, Nenad. I hope to see you soon on the show again. And everyone, thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.
Bye.